Hobako Hinga, greetings in Hajong language, Namaskar in Bengali. Very good afternoon who are in Geneva right now, and good evening to our Asian countries participants. My name is Shohel Hajong. I belong to Hajong Indigenous community from Bangladesh and moderating this side event. This is an online side event to the 15th session of expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples. Thank you all who have joined here and who are watching from the our Facebook Live. You know, the International Decade on Indigenous Language is giving us an opportunity to talk, to revitalize, protect, and promote indigenous languages. We think it is a very important element because our cultural existence is also dependent on our mother tongues, but we are losing our languages. No, it is true. Therefore, during the decade period, what initiatives we are taking at the state level or at the global level, it is very crucial. Indigenous communities also have the responsibility to be aware, saving of their own language. And this side event is organized by, Bangladesh Indigenous Language Decade Observance Committee, which is in Bengali is Antarjatik Adibashi Bhasha Doshok Udjapon Committee Bangladesh, which is formed on the occasion of International Decade on Indigenous Language from 2022 to 2032. We think it is a significant initiative of the indigenous languages activists as well as indigenous communities in Bangladesh who failed to create this kind of platform to work for their language, especially during the decade period. I think this side event organizing is one of the advocacy targets of that platform. However, we will hear from our speakers, from the participants about the situation of indigenous people's language in Bangladesh and what is their challenges, and the recommendations and how to overcome these challenges. The global expert and stakeholders from outside of Bangladesh also could contribute to suggesting and recommending taking their floor to this event as well. So I want to mention some housekeeping rules. This is please, you need to mute your microphone when you are not talking. We will have a question answer session after the distinguished listed speakers. And during that time, the participant could raise their questions or comments. And you could introduce yourself as well in the chat box. If you have any questions, any comments, please leave them in chat box as well. And during the open discussion, you need to raise your hand to talk, then we will give you the floor. And we are telling you that we are recording this event and the live stream is going on our organizational Facebook pages. And this is just a rule just introduced with you. And very welcome again, all participants. Firstly, I would like to give this floor to Mr. Badhon Areng. He is member secretary of this Bangladesh Indigenous Language Decade Observance Committee and also general secretary, Cultural and Development Society. So now the floor is for Mr. Badhon Areng. Okay, maybe some connection problem for the Badhonda, and now we are giving the floor to our another speaker. He is Mr. Lelung Khumi from Bandarban. Lelungda, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. I'm Lelung Khumi. I'm from Bandarban Hill District, Chirong Hill Tracts of Bangladesh. I belong to one of the most smallest indigenous groups known as Khumi, which is in number about 3,000. So let me share the situation of the Khumi language in Bangladesh with all the present listeners and all indigenous brothers and sisters. As we know, Bangladesh is a country of multi-nation, multilingual, and diverse cultures. It's claimed that more than 50 different indigenous people live in the country in the Plain Lands and Chittagong Hill Tracts before the country was born in 1971. Kumi indigenous people is one of them. They are mainly concentrated in the remote areas of three sub-districts, Thanchi, Ruma, Rongchori, or Bandhaman Hill District of Chittagong Hill Tracts, Bangladesh. According to a census conducted by Society for Environment and Human Development, known as SED, in 2014, the population of the Kumi is 2,890. In Bangladesh, most of them are dependent on the traditional shifting cultivation, locally known as jhum cultivation. Apart from Bangladesh, the Kumis also live in the Chin state of Myanmar. Large population are concentrated over there, and some around 3,000 Kumis they are concentrated in Mizoram state of India. The Kumis speak the same language, even though there are some different dialects in Myanmar. The Kumi belongs to the family language of the Kukichin of the Tibetan Burmese. Linguists claim that Bom, Mro, Lusai Kyang, and Pangkhwa are the similar language family in Bangladesh. The Kumi uses the Roman scripts as their scripts. The total alphabets of the Kumis are 25. These scripts have been used for about 10 years in Myanmar and about 50 years in Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Kumis have started to use the scripts in Bangladesh after they have converted into Christianity, actually around 1971. About 50% Kumi practices the scripts in Bangladesh, especially the young generation. The Kumi language is considered as an endangered language in Bangladesh due to many reasons, especially as we know that the population of a language is like below 20,000. It's considered as endangered. So since Kumi population is around 3,000, so it must be considered as endangered language. The language has not yet been introduced in a formal educational system, though it has written scripts and practiced through informal learning systems in Kumi villages. In fact, the oral literatures of the Kumi have been passed through generation to generation in an informal ways of practices. However, the key reasons for dying out the language can be due to less exercise of written form, lack of written literature, lack of formal learning system, lack of government supports, and the influence of other languages. And to save the endangered languages, International Mother Language Institute in Bangladesh, the Tribal Cultural Institutes, Hill District Councils, and the concerned ministry can take different initiatives in consultation with the indigenous community. Research on endangered languages can be conducted by linguists and language experts. Dictionary, written literature, and formal multilingual education can be promoted in order to preserve the endangered languages. The practice of continuous language speaking is more, the practice of continuous language speaking by speakers is more important than preserving the languages in archive or museum. That's all from my side. Thank you very much for your patient listen, and I wish every success of the language decade. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lelung Da. Lelung Kumi is from Bandarban, Bangladesh. Now we are giving the floor to our member secretary, Badhon Areng. Maybe now his connection is okay. Badhon Da, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm extremely sorry from the very beginning. I was facing some challenges here in Dhaka of network coverage. So I'm sorry. Dear audience, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, greetings from International Decade on Indigenous Language Observance Committee, Bangladesh. It is a great opportunity for us to raise our language issue on the global platform during the EMRIP session. I'd like to thank all participants who have joined this side event. Your suggestions and discussions will encourage our efforts to work on indigenous languages in Bangladesh. Other countries or organizations also could follow the good practices that will be discussed here. Especially, today's our discussion issue in the situation of indigenous languages in Bangladesh, challenges and way forward is very important considering the time of our country status. We, the indigenous language activists in Bangladesh, are avid to do some effective initiatives during the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. Out of 40 languages in Bangladesh, 14 are endangered. The state language and education media of country is Bengali. Few minutes ago, we were listening speech of Mr. Lelum Kumi that he was the belonging of Khmer community in Bangladesh, and his language is also considered as an endangered language in Bangladesh. On the occasion of the IDIL 2022 to 2032, the indigenous peoples of Bangladesh have formed a decade observance committee with the community of indigenous languages and activists with an objective to work collectively. During the decade, the committee made a plan and it has started to work for the campaign during the IDIL, Dialogue Seminar Languages Fairs, language fairs, publications, advocacy, campaigns, and group discussions on indigenous languages are included in the activities. Here I want to tell about our story, how we started our committee formation. This year in February, from the very beginning, we were waiting for something that from the beginning of the decade of indigenous languages, maybe someone or some organization will start something to do. Till February, we couldn't see. There was no any initiative. But some of our very good activists, language activists and cultural activists, we tried to share each other and we tried to form a committee. Especially the young groups were very active and their initiative was highly appreciable, and we are grateful to them. And some of our senior activists and devoted activists, they were immediately supported us and they appreciate our initiatives. And we are very happy that today we are sitting here together internationally. Today we are discussing here on the indigenous status of Bangladesh. We told about that here in Bangladesh 40 languages, and out of 40, there are 14 languages are endangered. The Decade Observation Committee of Bangladesh is making a plan to work at the local and national level with the local indigenous peoples, and their organizations are making them aware of the decade, as well as the importance of revitalization of the indigenous endangered languages. The committee would like to work to the community people to collect the language data and cultural instruments for languages documentation. Throughout the decade, planned-wise activities will be implemented and shared with community people. The lobby and advocacy activities will be continuing between indigenous peoples and government bodies to implement the mother tongue-based education for all indigenous children in Bangladesh. That was a mandate in the National Education Policy 2010. We appreciate that the Bangladesh government has already taken an initiative to provide primary education to children of 5 indigenous communities in their mother tongue. The chosen languages were Chakma, Marma, Tripura, Garo, and Shadre. But for other indigenous children of the country, we do not see the initiative till now. Even we did not see any initiative from the government level on the occasion of the Indigenous Language Year 2019 and the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. Here we have also an Indigenous Language Year Observation Committee in 2019, and we try to work through the country with some other communities, especially Garo, Chakma, Marma, Tripura, and Orao Shantal, and some other also. We have some experience working on that year observation, language observation. We should do lobby and advocacy with the government and other stakeholders to take effective initiatives on the occasion of the IDIL 2022 to 2032. The state and other stakeholders should take the appropriate initiatives to preserve, develop, and revitalize indigenous languages with the effective participation of indigenous communities to revitalize the endangered languages of the country. Practicing mother languages and documenting the languages vocabulary are very important. We need to consider it seriously. And recently, we also trying to work with the IMLI, International Mother Language Institute in Bangladesh, that we are going to translate into 5 languages the incomplete memories written by the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation. The 5 languages are Garo, Chakma, Marma, Tripura, and Shadre. It is also a good sign or good initiative for the indigenous languages, and we are having some opportunity to practicing our intellectual practicing through our own languages, developing books and also developing some literature works. We are happy to do that with the International Mother Language Institute. We asked the United Nations Expert Mechanism Permanent Forum to Indigenous Issues and UNESCO, other stakeholders to call on the state too. implement a mother tongue-based primary education for all indigenous children in Bangladesh, ensuring the recruitment of the linguist teachers and conducting proper training for them. State must take action to preserve and revitalize the endangered languages. State and relevant UN organizations must pay attention to the community initiatives on the revitalization of indigenous languages and provide technical and financial support. UNP, FII, UNESCO, and other stakeholders can provide some scholarships for indigenous youth and language activists for building their capacity in the digital or technical language movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Badunda, for your welcome speech. You have rightly mentioned the background of indigenous languages in Bangladesh, and also challenges, and also some recommendations. We have seen Professor Mesbah Kamal sir also join. Welcome, sir, and thank you very much for joining the meeting. So we are happy that Mr. Binotamoy Dhamaida is a new elected chair of the UN expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples, and he's very busy right now. We know this. So, but we are actually very happy that he has given his time to join here. So now, right now, we would like to request Mr. Binotamoy Dhamaida to take your floor for the special intervention in this side event. Dhamaida.
Thank you, Sohal. Thank you, organizer, for inviting me to this important event. EMRIP, the expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples, we have the clear mandate, the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It has also provided a mandate that EMRIP will take country engagement process to support the indigenous peoples organizations for their law, policy, developments, and other issues that is much important on the local level recognition for indigenous peoples' rights. So now turning to the point that we are talking about, the theme, the indigenous language and international decade, how we can work or how we can contribute or what we could do. What I like to say in the beginning, that expert mechanisms, according to their mandate, took part in various processes, including conducted study on the indigenous language and culture, education, access to justice, the participation, right to self-determination, land rights, and so on, in line with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So now the most important part is that after doing this study and adopted by the Human Rights Council, it is also our responsibility as indigenous peoples organizations to contextualize their recommendations at the local level. So the study EMRIP conducted in 2012 is the Indigenous Peoples' Languages and Cultures. That is, if you see the current outcome of this International Language Decade, and it was also the initiative from the EMRIP in the beginning. As an outcome and in different process of the UN system, then 2019, we had this International Year of Indigenous Language, and then we now have this decade, which is very much important to work on indigenous language preservation, protection. Now the point is that why it's so important for us, because we see these languages are often a central and principal feature of us as indigenous peoples, our identities as collective, as individuals. It provides the unity as well because of the language. So it's also the distinctiveness, the indigenous people's language, the common feature of many indigenous peoples and the global indigenous peoples movement. If we see the movement also rooted in the colonization and decolonization processes where indigenous peoples, languages and cultures are severely destructed. In order to exercise our language rights, the most important part is also needing the recognition at the national level. The recognition must come from the political consensus. The political consensus means it is not only among the indigenous people itself, but also the state agencies, mechanisms, and definitely government as the representative of the state. They have the responsibility on that. So now, why this recognition is important? Without the recognitions as indigenous peoples, then our land territory also very much distracted, and also our land territories, self-governance, autonomy system, which are the foundation of our culture, our identity, our language practices, our spiritual activities, that will become under the threat. So when it comes to the recognition, the political recognition, then you have the opportunity to work on the protection or revitalization, preservation, our language issues. Now the UN declarations we talk about as an EMRIP, that this is the basis for all actions, including at the legislative and policy level on the protection and promotion of indigenous people's rights, which I was talking about, the language, which is part of our rights. And if you also go through the UN declaration, this is all actually our rights are interrelated, interconnected. But the main important one is the recognition of the right to self-determination. So this is the basic thing. That's why indigenous peoples movement, indigenous peoples approaches to the member states. Also, if you see the study and report EMRIP has produced last 15 years, all are connected to the right to self-determination. Some may have different interpretation about the right to self-determination. Indigenous people's interpretations on the right to self-determination, there are two types. One is internal self-determination. The other one is the external self-determination. Internal self-determination, it is that the indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination with their own institutions within the state sovereignty framework. The external self-determination for indigenous peoples also refer that they have the right to establish network connection with the international forum, international organizations. For example, the relationship that indigenous people has been built over the years, this is part of their right to self-determination, and this is from the external context. So this is the thing that many of the government, many of the states actually don't clearly understand to all these level of interpretations on the right to self-determination. Now, when we talk about our language rights and also this preservation, revitalization, as I heard, there are you have already discussed about the institutionalization and the recognitions. That's important, but the most important part also in line with the international human rights instruments, the legal and policy development is the most important thing. And for the legal and policy development, the recognition is also part of that. And the recognition comes also with the collective rights and individual rights. And now, until unless we are not recognized as indigenous peoples, then our collective rights are under the threat. Our language rights is also, from my point of view, this is rooted to our collective rights. So for the national level, we have the opportunity now to see this area of work, taking the opportunity of this international decade of the languages, the global action plan that UNESCO has been taken, and UN human rights mechanisms in relation to indigenous peoples For example, expert mechanism, permanent forum on indigenous issues, they are also part of this process. Now, we had in the past, we had this international decade for the indigenous peoples, right, for the partnership building, for the development program. Now, for this one, for for our language, so we need to see how we can best use this plan of action at our national level, at the local level, doing through lobby advocacy and networking activities on the ground, and also the effective engagement and meaningful participation of indigenous peoples. This is the most important part I see that in our process at the grassroots level. So now, where indigenous peoples are not recognized, definitely there are challenges, but there is also another avenue that we can use, which I can elaborate further later if there is anything. But what I can tell you that at the national level, where you have the limitations to engage directly with this national committee, because UNESCO at the national level runs by the national committee, where we have a very little access or we are excluded from that process. Since it is the decade for the international decade for indigenous people's language, we have the opportunity to establish our direct connection with the UNESCO at the headquarters, whereas the indigenous people's mechanisms, for example, EMRIP and Permanent Forum, can support establishing this communication if there is anything lacking or any waste of any gap in the communication on this level. So here EMRIP can support, EMRIP can help to reach out at the global level. That's where our right to self-determination at the external level. Our internal self-determination for the language also, we have the right to exercise our own language. Otherwise, it will be part of the historical injustices that we know. The discrimination, inequality, how is rooted to our indigenous peoples in many countries. They've destructed their own institutions, their governance, their autonomy. That's practically what we have been observing in our case in Bangladesh as well, that because of this external threat, when I say external threat means that indigenous people's land and territory within the country, they are under the threat of by the dominant society. The dominant society, now we see who they are in Bangladesh context, that every day our life are making very critical. So anyway, going back to the language issue, what I will ask to you, the national committee that you have formed, I think it's a good opportunity to establish the connection with the UNESCO headquarters, the contact person, and also see their interpretations in terms of the national level engagement. And also at the same time, you need finance resources to continue this lobby advocacy activity. What I will say also, I suggest that the government, the donors, you have to explore the donors at the national level to support, because this is the international commitment. And now, in order to implement at the national level, they also have the responsibility to support it. That's one of the area that I like to highlight today, that in order to preserve and revitalize our language, the indigenous people language, we need to support the collaborations from not only among the indigenous peoples, but also outsiders, and also from the international corporations, as well as the legal and policy matters, the effective legal policy development, and also the effective and meaningful participation of indigenous peoples, particularly now taking into account and the opportunity for this international language decade. We can argue that our effective participation and meaningful contribution to this field, developing law policy issues, it's important, and because it is our issues, and without our participations, it is useless. So I will stop here And thank you so much once again for inviting me to this webinar. And I look forward to hear more in the future. And anyway, my suggestion is that whatever you discussed today, if you have any recommendations, you should write 1 or 2 pages of statement with recommendations, and you should send to the EMRIP Secretariat and to the UNESCO as well. UNESCO, the person involved for this international language decade, you should send there. So these 2 recommendations I will suggest, I will make for you as an outcome for this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Binotamoy Dhamaida, for your powerful intervention and also valuable suggestions. Yes, we can do that. From this discussion, we'll prepare a summary with the recommendation, and also we'll send you and send to EMRIP as well as UNESCO. So thank you, Dhamaida, for your time here. So again, a lot of congratulations to you for holding this position. Actually, it is good for us that you are there and using this mechanism, EMRIP mechanism. Actually, we can work in the country, and the situation of indigenous peoples in Bangladesh, and also how could we go ahead with these situations, and this language decade observance, the committee is also working, and I think in the decade, during the decade time, for the indigenous language preservations and promotions, what we are thinking or planning, we will hope the support from your side also. Now we will go ahead again with our listed speakers. In Bangladesh is a country of around 40 indigenous languages and numbers of endangered languages and the language of small communities. So Banai is a very small community in Bangladesh, and they have like hundreds of people only, and their language also very vulnerable. Now I would like to request Ripon Chandra Banai, he is from Banai community, to take the floor to inform us the situation of Banai language in Bangladesh. Ripon, please go ahead.
This is Ripon Chandra Banai from Bangladesh, and I belong to Banai community, as earlier mentioned, Sohelda. The situation of indigenous language in Bangladesh, challenges and way forward. On this site event, today's distinguished speakers, participants, guests, and others, I would like to thank you all. And this time, I would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate Dhamaida, who is newly elected as a chair of EMRIP. The topic, situation of indigenous language in Bangladesh, challenges and way forward, is an important issue. We know that Bangladesh is a multilingual and multicultural diverse country. Though that, already mentioned, we are more than 50 indigenous communities in Bangladesh, but most of the communities are smallest of the small communities. Like me, I belong to Banai, and we are right now in Bangladesh, it is below 2,000 population in Bangladesh. And it's already mentioned that Bangladesh government have initiated few initiatives regarding the mother language, like International Mother Language Institute. They have reported and they have researched where 14 languages in Bangladesh, and among the 14 languages, 40 languages, 39 languages are from the indigenous community. And among the 39, 14 languages are endangered, and others are also very vulnerable. And this report, the report published by the Bangladesh International Mother Language Institute, where they mentioned and reported Banai language, Banai communities have lost their language. It's really not correct, because we are Banai community and we have our own language, and still we are using our own language. It's quite similar to Hajong language. Like us, there are many small communities like Hodi, Dalu, and others. Now, my observation is how the small communities are excluded by that kind of initiatives, like International Mother Language Institute. They reported, we already lost our language, but we are using our language and still it's alive. But population is very small. I think that population is not matter, because if we think language is a part and parcel of our life, and it's very relevant to our emotion, our culture, and many things. So how many people have been using their language, that's not important. The important is we are using our own language. But unfortunately, state itself denied that we have lost our language. This is very what called sorrowful for us, that state denying us that our language is still alive. And I also want to share a few another challenges like attitude. You all know that, and we have been facing also in Bangladesh, when indigenous peoples are talking each other in public place, many times they face awkward situation. Sometimes they face slang by the other people, and this kind of situation, this kind of awkward situation, really sorrowful for us, and that's why sometimes we are not using our language in different places, and we cannot be using our own language everywhere freely, and that's also one of the challenges, I think. And you all know that recently the Bangladesh government has taken an initiative, particularly the ICT division, to digitalize indigenous languages. My concern is how the communities involved with this process, and I'm afraid of are we going to exclude it again? I don't know what will happen, but I think this is good initiation by the government. And among the 50 indigenous communities, the Bangladesh government already started 5 mother languages for the pre-primary education. It's Badanda already mentioned. But what about the others? What about the others recognized 45 communities? And what about the communities, those communities have their own script? How the language will be protect and preserve. I think this is the one of the most important question. Like my community, we are using our own language, but we have no our own script. And in this regard, how we are preserved and how we are prevent our language. And one of the important another issue is population. We are going decrease day by day. So once in Bangladesh before the 1971, thousands of Banai communities are living in Bangladesh, but after 1971 and the liberation war, most of the Banai people forcefully displaced from their own land, and now they are living in India and other state of the India, many state of the Indias. Now, I am very much concerned, and I am very much concerned about my language. The situation, if the situation is going on, and if there is no any initiative by the government, we cannot preserve, we cannot prevent our language anymore. And I think it's the high time to prevent and preserve our language right now and from now. I would like to conclude my sharing. Before conclude my sharing, I would like to place my specific recommendations. Like, I think the report published by the International Mother Language Institute, they have to review it again, because we are not counted here. Banai are not counted here. I don't know. Maybe other communities are also not counted. So it should be reviewed again, so that other communities, those who are excluded, they could count it. And another one is for 5 communities. The 5 communities are
yes, time is very limited. Now, could you wrap up in 1 minute, please?
Okay, thank you very much. My recommendation, the last one is to take proper initiative to revitalize the endangered and most vulnerable languages. And I think without support from the state, only communities cannot protect and preserve their own languages. And finally, I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this such kind of important event, and also feeling honored to being part of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ripon Banai, for your valuable speech and mentioning the situation of indigenous languages in Bangladesh, including the Banai indigenous language. So, dear audience, you know that this event, it is side event on the EMRIP session, and the speakers, I would like to request you to consider the time limitations. No, we need to finish timely this event. That's why I think we will consider this. So before Professor Mesbah Kamal sir, maybe we can give for 1 or 2 speakers. So now I would like to request Ms. Chanchana Chakma, and she is Secretary General of Bangladesh Indigenous Women's Network. Chanchana Di, please go ahead.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, distinguished speaker. I'm very privileged to be here, the part of this event. It's very important for the indigenous people because this is the decade of international indigenous language. That's why I would like to say Juju. It's called good morning or good evening, everyone, meaning like namaste. Juju and Patrutru. Patrutru mean welcome. We should use our language because this is the very important session. Again, I'm saying Juju and Patru through everyone. I'm from Chittagong Hill Tracts. I'm Chakma community, belong to Chakma community. Chakma community is one of the largest community of indigenous people in Bangladesh. But here, indigenous language is very critical and also still not like legal and constitutionally not recognized as indigenous people. We are fighting for, especially Chittagong Hill Tract indigenous people, we are fighting for self-determination and right to land, like resource and our territory. That's why it is very important. Damaida also mentioned that territory and land resources is very important to protection and prevention the indigenous language. And in Chittagong Hill Tracts, due to the non-implement CST Act, we are having a lot of problems like language aggression, culture aggression, then Islamization. Who are going to be Islam, they are also losing their language. Those we are practicing our language, we are also losing our language, because most of what now the Chakma mixed with Bengali word, it's called like language aggression and culture aggression, because we are mixing and we are for example, in CADC in Mizoram, those who are Chakma, they are using their pure language, which is the Chakma pure language. And in Chittagong Hill Tracts, although the government take 5 languages for the indigenous people in Chittagong Hill Tracts, 3 languages, Chakma, Marma, and Tripura, but still lack of teacher, lack of training of them and equipment, and also there is no enough teacher and enough equipment, and it should be budget for the teacher for training them, because without a teacher, then how the children will learn the indigenous language. Even we have to also say not all subject, it's only one subject who are like Chakma, it's one subject compulsory. Even I saw in Mizoram, like in Northeast India, they have only, like each Chakma, they have one Chakma language from primary school to class 7. They must be have to read, they have to study. Then after that, because it's middle school they finish, after they no need to study, it depend on the student. We have to also decide here how many subjects we will be like the education, those who are make the books, they have to 1 book or 3 book or 4 book, because I saw in India there is only 1 book. There is so many things of like Chakma poem or a story or a lot of things. Then if we study, and we have to also know how to write. Me personally, little bit I can read and write the Chakma language, because I learned when I was like graduation 2nd year. Then it was very good, but now I didn't practice also. Personally, I am not also practice. That's why I also going to forget our script. Then should be practiced. Everybody, those who have script and their language, we should be practiced. Usually those who are living in city area, they are not using their own language also. They are using always Bengali with their children and their family, but we should be use our own language. Then we can preserve our language. And if anyone like say, oh, we have to preserve our language and revitalization, but if we don't practice, then how we will preserve our language? That's why I would like to say, especially I'm going to finish, because I'm not expert of the multilingual language. Why we are getting lost our language? We have to understand ourselves, our community. We have to practice ourselves, and we have to also teach other people our language. And my recommendation is Bangladesh government should be budget for the indigenous language. Those who have own script, then they should be training the teacher, and also provide the book in the primary school. And we have no middle school, but the primary school, at least primary school. And for the Chittagong Hill Tracts, it's very important fully implement of CST Accord. Otherwise, the CST people, they will not preservation their language, because today also the Chakma village, which is Manekshuri, the Khagrasuri area, their houses and their land, they are trying to occupy the settler Bengali people, and they are losing. Then how they will preserve their language? Then how their students, their children will study their own language? Their life is insecurity. The indigenous people life should be security, peace and security. That's why it's very important to fully implement of CST Accord in Chittagong Hill Tracts, and reform a land commission in plain land. Otherwise, our language and our life is insecure. Then how we will secure our language? That is my point. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanchonadi, for your valuable intervention. And thanks, participant, for your questions as well. And you are being with us. Yes, we will give floor to our respected Professor Mesbah Kamal sir. But before that, from North Bengal, Jogendranath Sarkar Toppo, yes, General Secretary of Orao Foundation, also a member of this International Decade on Indigenous Language Udjapon Committee, Bangladesh. So before Mesbah Kamal sir, please, if you can deliver your speech shortly, some important points, no? Yes, Jogenda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, audience. I belong to Urao community, northern part of Bangladesh, but I respect to limitation of times. So I have some problems or limitations as Bangladesh government to I identify here. Not discuss broadly. So I some multilingual education program limitation success. Shortest classroom, having students of different language in the same class. Lack of authority guidelines for teaching in mother tongue. Some small ethnic groups do not have accurate information in government. Lack of ethnic teachers. Lack of publication on language, art, and culture. If we cannot overcome the above limitations, then ethnic language, like many languages, will one day will be lost from the world. So I have to some recommendation to arrange the classroom as per demand in the concerned school, with special consideration to establish a school suitable for the needs of the ethnic group. Arranging tiffin at a school for every children. To appoint teachers from among the people who know the common language for the shortage of teachers. Provide clear and guidelines on multilingual education to concerned officers working at the field level. Strengthen the system of inspection and monitoring in the concerned school. Informing SMC members about multilingual education activities in school. School management calendar showing sympathy for the religious, social customs and traditions of the ethnic group. Encourage the use of educational materials including familiar and local needs. To coordinate all the ministries, division of the government working on the education and development sector. Form a cell, multiple education activities under the Department of Education to take the experience of the countries of the world where multilingual education activities are underway. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joganda, for your very short and precise speech, including some recommendations. And thanks everyone who are in this side event. And now we would like to request our guest speaker, Dr. Mesbah Kamal. He is professor of University of Dhaka and also he is coordinator of Parliamentary Caucus on Indigenous Peoples and Minority Affairs, Bangladesh. Dear Mesbah Kamal sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shohel Hajon, and warm greetings to all the participants of this event. It is indeed very important that the UN system has, declared the International Language Decade, and it is an opportunity for the world's indigenous peoples to focus on their language rights and the issue of protection, the revitalization and preservation of their languages. So I would like to draw attention to the situation in Bangladesh very briefly. I've been given 10 minutes time. So I would like to say, first of all, that language is extremely important, particularly for identity and the distinctiveness and the heritage. And of course, this is inseparable from the existence of a nation. Unfortunately, many of the indigenous peoples of the world, including that of the Bangladesh, have lost their language because of many reasons, some of them historic. The process of assimilation has been a big, historical fact, but fighting that process of assimilation, many of the indigenous nationalities have been able to, preserve their identity together with their language. In order to preserve those who are still identifiable and wants to be identified, that means self-identify as indigenous nationalities, preservation of their language is very important. But for these, the nationality concerned has a great role, of course, but also the mainstream community has a very important role to play. Their understanding, their recognition, and their responsible role is important, will play important role in the preservation of the endangered languages. But more than that, the role of the state is very important. because it is the role of the state which can either facilitate it or even try to destroy the identities, including their cultures and languages. We have seen that the Bangladesh state has been quite slow in recognizing the identities, the indigenous identities, and not only slow, they have also been very, very partial. I think all of us who are present in today's meeting at this moment, they are very well aware of that. The indigenous people started for their, identity, recognition of their identity in 1972, immediately after the independence of the country. But that struggle is still going on. And even after long 50 years, the Constitution still says that, the people of the country would be known as Bengalis, meaning, or rather implying that all the people of the country are Bengalis. Though they have accommodated up to this that, the citizenship would be called Bangladeshi, thereby creating some space for recognition of the others who are not Bengalis. But more than that, the Article 23 by Teisher Ko, that has 23 by A, has partially recognized the other cultures that exists in Bangladesh. But further development, as we all know, has been the recognition of the indigenous language in the education policy 2010. And following that, though the state took 7 long years to introduce mother tongue based multilingual education, 5, education in 5 languages, primary education in 5 languages have begun in Bangladesh. But as I mentioned, it is very slow. Not only that it has taken very, very long time, but once it has begun, the pace has been very, very slow because the, imparting education in mother tongue based, education has remained limited to 5 languages only. So it hasn't increased from 5 to 6 or to 10 in the next leap that was supposed to be. So so that is the situation. So, but I would say that recognition of the 50 indigenous nationalities, though not using the term indigenous nationalities, but whatever word they have used, they have at least, the state has at least recognized the plurality of the plural nature of Bangladesh, the diversity that exists in Bangladesh, by way of recognizing 50 indigenous nationalities. And that is a very welcome development which took place towards the end of 2019. And I can inform you, I can communicate with certainty that the Ministry of Culture has taken further initiative to recognize the unrecognized, still unrecognized indigenous communities or nationalities of Bangladesh. So there has recently been one meeting in the ministry in which I had the opportunity to attend and chair. This initiative has been floated, and I think this is a very welcome development. So, because that will mean inclusion of the smaller in number communities or nationalities into the state mechanism or by the state mechanism. So that is a very welcome development, and I think as a logical, way forward from there would be the recognition, or rather would be the introduction of mother tongue based multilingual education in another cluster of languages, that is from 5 to 10 in the next stage. I'm hoping that initiative will be taken along this line soon, but it will depend on how the indigenous nationalities and the indigenous organizations put forward this issue, how strongly they can raise their voices, or how skillfully they can lobby on this matter. They can draw the attention of the highest authorities in Bangladesh. I mentioned the highest because Bangladesh being one of the most centralized states in the region, of course, the decisions tend to come from the top. It doesn't go from the bottom. So that is the situation as I find now. So the ball is moving, though very slowly, but it is moving. And I think the political recognition, language right is I think is a very fundamental right. But we all have to understand that it is not only a linguistic issue or not only a cultural issue. This is also a political issue. And, of the language movement of 1952 could be cited here to state that the language right is a political issue. And so, I think the world knows it pretty well now. So, the political recognition of the people concerned is very important. So, political recognition of the indigenous nationalities is extremely important, and for this, the demand for the constitutional recognition of the indigenous nationalities is very important. And this recognition can be of two types. One is the recognition of the individual indigenous nationalities, say Chakmas, Santals, or say Banai, as Ripon Banai was speaking here. Or many other nationalities are represented. So individual recognition of the nationalities on the one side, and the collective recognition as indigenous peoples. That is also very important. And this can very easily be accommodated by putting a you know, appendix at the end of the Constitution, referring to this in the Constitution, in the main body of the Constitution, making a particular clause about it or article about it, and then putting up a putting up the whole list in the appendix would be enough to recognize this all these communities and ensure that Bangladesh ensure the diversity and the plurality that Bangladesh really is. So that is very important, and for that, the indigenous peoples of Chittagong Hill Tracts have been fighting from 1972 onwards, and the indigenous peoples of the Plainland have been fighting, especially beginning from the 1990s. And I must also mention here very briefly that it was very important, and it shows the importance of the language, and that, you know, the right of the children of Chittagong Hill Tracts to have primary education in mother tongue was one of the clauses of the famous Chittagong Hill Tracts Accord signed by the government and PCJSS in 1997. So one of the clauses was that the children of Chittagong Hill Tracts would get education, primary education in their mother tongue. So that is very important. And we know that, you know, Jatiyo Adibashi Porishad took the initiative to introduce mother tongue based schools in Rajshahi district just after 3-4 years, perhaps it was in 2000, that they began the school in Borshapada and Sundarpur. So these were important developments, but you know, it has been quite difficult to sustain the initiatives. The non-recognition of the rather non-implementation or rather partial implementation of the Chittagong Hill Tracts has worked as an obstacle. And I should say that absence of support for continuation of the initiative for mother tongue based education in the Plainland, because the initiative was from the community or from the nationality, indigenous nationalities, and was not, you know, was not supplemented, or rather was not supported, adequately supported by the government. And that's why it has been very difficult for the nationality, concerned nationalities, to sustain those schools. However, some of the NGOs came forward and some of the donors came forward, but you know, that has helped partially. But looking at the scenario in Bangladesh, we find that the donor-driven initiatives has their limitations, and that's why you know, some of the NGOs, even the world's biggest NGO, once ran about 3,000 schools, you know, for the indigenous children in Bangladesh, and now the number has dropped to almost 1/10 of that. So, you know, project approach to education is totally unacceptable and unsustainable. Yeah. So, education is a right of every children, generation after generation, and this will remain a fundamental right as long as human civilization exists. So, you know, it should be treated as a right, and the state should come forward and take the responsibility of the education, and particularly mother tongue based multilingual education for the Adivashi children. I would end by saying that this is finally a question of closely linked to the right of self-determination of the indigenous peoples. And this also, this also shows how much democratic a state and a society is. Because unless we can ensure the language rights of all peoples of the country, we are a far way behind from becoming a democratic society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Mesbah Kamal sir, for your valuable discussion. And you have rightly said that the rights of language is fundamental rights, and recognitions of indigenous rights also very important. You have mentioned that the recognition of indigenous nationalities and also collective identity of indigenous peoples. Thank you very much for your special intervention in this side event. So dear audience, now we want to give some space for open discussion. We are behind from our the listed time. So now we want to give 2 or 3 persons in this audience. Just you can take 1 or 2 minutes. If you have any urgent issue to raise here relevant to this our topic, this is the indigenous language of Bangladesh. So now the floor is open. Please, you can take your floor. You can raise your hand and take your floor to speak 1 or 2 minutes. Krishnapada Munda.
Okay. Thanks to moderator and all participants and organizers. Greetings from Sundarban Adivashi Munda Samastha Sams in the southwest part of Bangladesh near Sundarban coastal area. Johar and Namaskar. It's an important discussion about our languages in indigenous communities in Bangladesh. And the Munda community, I belong to Munda community and from the Sundarban areas. Munda community have lost their original language, Mundari, in the Sundarban areas, but some Mundari language are practices in Bangladesh, I think in the north part of Bangladesh. But at present we speak in Shadri language, but it has no any alphabets. We practice this language orally. Our beliefs, ritual beliefs, our cultures, everything are oral practices. We have no the written documents. In fact, in Bangladesh, the education system, there is no our community teachers and community education in the primary level. I would like to say that the Shadri language is not practices in the primary level in our areas. So it is a challenging situations we faced. And although Bangladesh government not recognized constitutionally as a Adivashi, so every nations, if there is no language and culture, so the nations cannot exist. Sorry. This is the important part today, and I suggest only a government should take to protect our own language, old cultures, and in the international level also should take some initiative to protect our beliefs, our language and cultures. So this is all. Thanks again to all.
Thank you, Krishnapada Mundada, for your this special intervention. So now I would like to give floor 1 minute Endro Solomodda and then Muhammad Munabbir Hussain. Endroda, please.
Yes, thank you for giving me a chance to speak here. I belongs to Khasi community. My name is Andrew Joel Shalomer. There is one ethnic group here in Khasi also. There is a sub-tribe named Lingam. They are also in Bangladesh and India. They are very close to Khasi community and border with the Garos. So they are also now in danger because they insecure in their identity crisis. So it should be take to recognize them as a Langam language is there, because Khasi also they told that they are part of Khasi, and Garo also they are calling that they are also part of Garo. So they are now in both. What can I say? They are in. They are in loss of identity because they don't know then what they will introduce themselves that as a Garo or as a Khasi. So it is also very danger for them because they will lose their language. They have their own language. They have their own culture. They have their own dress also there. So only this much I want to introduce. Thank you very much for giving me a time.
Thank you very much, Endro Solomodda. Now Muhammad Munabbir Hussain, please.
Thank you. I worked with the NCTB from 2016 to 2021, and I coordinate the development of 5 ethnic language textbooks. From my experience, I want to suggest some way forward. That is, we can arrange language fair in the national level and local level to give an introduction which languages are spoken in Bangladesh, and we can arrange some night school from the community level to teach students the local language or ethnic languages. And because we introduced 5 textbooks in 5 languages, but implementation is not up to the mark, or it is not achieved because of the lack of teachers. So we need some teachers who can speak, read, write, and teach their own language. From the government side, it is not yet assured that a teacher will be provided, but from the community level, we can arrange some teacher training. What is started, I think, in the hill districts, and we can adopt some script, those languages who have no script, but because script is very much needed to make a language live. And other thing is that when we worked to develop the textbooks, lack of literatures, poems and stories is a problem. So the collection of poems, stories in every language is very much needed to make the language live. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presence and also your special recommendations. Now I would like to give floor Mr. Khokon Suiten Murmu. Khokon, please go ahead.
Well, Johar everybody. So are you hearing me?
Yes.
Oh, this is Khokon. Yeah, and thank you for arranging this event. And yeah, special thanks to all of you. And thanks also Dhamaita. He is now the chair of the EMRIP, and congratulate him. And yeah, language is the privilege, and language can enhance you, and language can enhance a nation. If we think before the 1971 of Bangladesh is not so much a progressive country because of the languages. The Urdu dominated Bengali. That's why the Bengali people earlier of 1971 that they don't have so much privilege to enhance themselves. So yeah, if you think about the partition of India after the subcontinent, the language is the major language played a major role to the segregate the communities. So yeah, now we are indigenous and our languages are dominated by the majorities, whether many of the part of Bangladesh, and almost all of we are from Bangladesh. So what I want to say is that we should concern about our languages in this language decades, and also we should concern about the how we should get access to the the national level platform, because this is the global platform, but the participants are almost from the indigenous community. Only two people are from Bengali. Now one is presenting, the Mesbah Kamal sir, and another is Manabdar Hossain, and this is very frustrating, as well as there are not international platform speakers who can understand our problems and acknowledge the problems. One thing I can say is that we should need to digitalize our indigenous language for preservation as per the digital way, and there are many other digital mechanisms, otherwise it will be loose too early. And we should develop the dictionaries like the endangered languages like Banai and Kumi and many other languages which is very much endangered. And we should preserve the dictionary first, and we should preserve it digitally. And one thing that government is still not recognizing and mentioning, that they should standardize our indigenous language to the university level, or the higher degrees. So we have to raise our voice from the very grassroots level, because all of the activists are attending this particular event. If we move to the ground, then and raise our voice to standardize our indigenous language to the higher studies, then maybe government will approve it to its policy. Thank you very much, sir.
1 minute for Horendranath Singh, no? Horen Singh, please, 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. I want to speak a challenge. The 5 indigenous language in Bangladesh, we speak largest people Bangladesh, but more than 30 languages we speak as a mother tongue. A small activity or indigenous people. It is a very vulnerable Bangladesh in this situation, but Bangladesh government have no initiative to ally this we strategy applied in Bangladesh itself is a challenge. The situation of indigenous language in Bangladesh. That's all.
Thank you, Horendranath Singh. Now we have 2 speakers. No, one is Pramod Hamum Pramod, and also Mathura Vikas Tripura, who is co-convener. He will give the closing remarks. No? So firstly, I would like to our speaker, Mr. Hamum Pramod. Please, Hamum Pramod, what is the discussion today? No, if summary, or you are also a Manipuri linguistic. From your view, you can talk in this session as a speaker. Please, Pramod.
Thank you, Suhail.
And thank you, distinguished speakers and all the guests. And I really apologize for, the time is a little early for me, so that's why I just wait for my turn. Anyway, that's okay. And our time is very limited. We say that it's only 1.5 hours, but I think it's more than 1.5 hours. So I'm not going too much elaborating because Motorada will conclude and summarize. So as you heard from the Sohail, that I am from Manipuri community. Meitei Lon, or Manipuri language, is our mother tongue. In Bangladesh, Meitei Lon speaker or Manipuri speaker is very not so much, like 25 to 35,000, but we are practicing very well. You heard a lot about our problem, like indigenous language problem, the preservation, the revitalization, and within the Bangladesh, there is a lot of problem about our recognition. So I'm not going details about that. I just want to mention that from the government side and from our community, we need their support to be to preserve and to practice our own language is very important, but we need to approach from government, at least two approach, not only one, just not including our language in the curriculum or the schooling, but also I think very important to the preserving the endangered language or to maintain the endangered language. So if I don't know, but we didn't find anyone from the government this forum today. Only the Munabbi Hussain sir, who was working in the textbook NCTB. But I think now the Bangladesh government introduced 5 languages, maybe next the 5 more altogether, maybe 10 or 12. But there are more than 50 languages. So we need another approach to intervene or to to prevent to losing our own mother tongue. So that's the only thing I want to share with you. Thank you all. Sure.
Thank you, Pramodda, for your very precise but a very valuable speech. So now we have like last speaker for closing remarks. But before that, one recommendation from Olik B. Professor Mesbah Kamal sir is here. He wanted to know about the Madhupur issue and Bilaisuri issue, if it is relevant to indigenous culture and language, what are happening in there. So if Professor Mesbah Kamal sir, are you agree to respond Olik B about Madhupur and Bilaisuri issue? So we can give you 2 minutes, sir, please.
Thank you very much for the time. In fact, the whole, the Adivasi existence depends on ensuring equal citizenship and basic fundamental rights of the peoples. But, it is being affected in many ways, including in Madhupur and in Bilaisuri, and in the in various other ports, Govindaganj, say for example, or say the Khasi Punjis in the Greater Sylhet. These are all burning issues for us. Now, when we talk about the language issue, when we talk about culture issues, the issues related to the very survival and existence of the indigenous peoples also come along. And that's why, say, when in a situation like Madhupur, where more than 20,000 people, are at risk of being, being expelled from their traditional land, and their traditional forest rights are being challenged. And when those are done in the name of, in the name of Bonayon, I've forgotten the exact word, বনের কি একটা বলছে তারা। So you know, social forestry is the word. সামাজিক বনায়ন, social forestry. So when unsocial initiatives are introduced in the name of social forestry, that affects the life of the people and endangers their existence. So these issues are very pertinent, but I did not want to focus on them because I wanted to concentrate on the languages. And on this point, I would just like to very quickly add that, the colonial partition of 1947 did not take into consideration the geographical territories of the indigenous communities, not even that of very big community of nationalities like the Bengalis and the Punjabis. So on the bigger front, the Bengalis and the Punjabis were split, and on the local front, many of the indigenous communities were split across the border, and that is having a very dangerous impact on the survival of these languages. So my point here would be that increasing coordination, contacts and coordination and cultural exchanges, literary exchanges across the border is very important. And why I'm particularly saying this, a friend of ours had been mentioning that their number, Ripon Banai, that they are only about 2,000. He mentioned perhaps now in Bangladesh, but there must be many more Banais across the border, which is not very far from their homeland, their homes in Mymensingh. So, but they are, not connected. They cannot, meet each other frequently or exchange. So, the cross-border linguistic and cultural communication, connection, exchange is very important. And the cross-border experiences like in Tripura or in Meghalaya, or in some other parts of the Northeast, at least, the languages are being, or have been introduced in the schools, and in many places they can sit for their school final exam. And in some places of India, they can do a PhD in their mother tongue. So that kind of, examples, would serve as a source of inspiration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your response. So now I would like to request our co-convener, Bangladesh Indigenous Language Decade Observance Committee, Mr. Mathura Bikash Tripura. He is also Executive Director of Jabarang Kallam Samiti and also awardee the International Mother Language Award 2021. I would like to request Mr. Mathura Bikash Tripura to deliver his closing remarks of this side event.
Thank you, Suhelda. So actually, the time is very short. It is already about to 8. The language is actually the way of expressing our mental situation, and that's why actually we have to think about our languages, and we have to think how to preserve our languages and how we can prevent the losing of our languages, because the language is the strong instrument of a culture and life of a person. the participants, speakers, and organizers, we are very much thankful to you that you have made the event successful. What I think is that there are many issues the government can take care of, especially the language issues and education in mother tongue, and preservation, revitalization, and promotion of the languages. All these things can be done by the government. And there are many languages in Bangladesh which are at risk of disappearance. Especially, there are many languages which are spoken by very few speakers, like the Remitsa language is spoken by only 6 speakers. Then there are many others like which are spoken by say 100, 200, or below 2,000 people. So government should think how they can prevent losing of these languages, because we know that if we lose any language, we will lose the values, history, and knowledge system of that language, and that is also we will ultimately lose the cultural diversity of the country. So I think government will take interventions to revitalize, preserve, and promote the indigenous languages in Bangladesh, as it has already started working on various issues. Like we have heard here that the government has already started introducing the mother tongue based multilingual education in 5 languages. I think in the near future, I think the other languages will also be taught in the schools, as the government has that plan. I think it is the plan for the government, the plan of the government, that they will start more about 6 languages in the future. It was actually supposed to be in this year. I don't know. Maybe government is planning for next year. Maybe we will have 6 more languages. Then gradually, I hope that all of the languages, about 40 languages of Bangladesh, will be taught in the schools. I hope the government of Bangladesh will also support the decade on indigenous languages, which has been started in this year, 2022, and will end in 2032. And we also hope that, especially the speakers here, they have expressed their expectations from the government, that the government will implement its commitment that it has given through its various documents, like the various policy and other legal documents. So I think it will be, the government will be able to do that. And I would like to thank the EMRIP chair, Mr. Vinantamay Dhamai. He has participated with us today, and special thank to Professor Bakamal sir, who has engaged the discussion today. And I would also like to give special thank to the speakers, Mr. Lilung Kumi, Mr. Ripon Chandra Barnai, Ms. Chanchana Chagma, Professor Jogendranath Topo, and also other speakers who has contributed in the process: Krishnapada Munda, Mr. Andrew Salmar, Professor Munabir Hossain. He is very much engaged with the development of curriculum and textbooks for the indigenous peoples in last couple of years. I'm very happy to have him here with us. Information on IP languages is still not properly documented. So I think during the decade, the indigenous peoples, they should do something so that they can document their languages. So in that, I think we need to do sort of community interventions, not always asking supports from others. Maybe we can also do ourselves, so that we can document our language properly. And so the respective speakers, the language users, they have many things to do. I think when we go for any formal education, we need many literatures, which is very much absent in the field. So the language speakers, they have to publish their languages. They have to develop the writing system and regularly exercise their languages, so that whenever the government starts working on their language, the language is prepared to go for the academic education. So I think all languages of the country should be would be taught in the schools in the near future. We need to support. We also need some supports from the international communities, especially the UN bodies and also some other global bodies, so that all together we can achieve the global goals like the SDGs. We are grateful to you all for participating in the event. We are grateful to EMRIP for supporting us organizing this side event. We hope that we'll be able to ensure that all of the languages are protected in Bangladesh and other parts of the world. And for that, actually, the government, indigenous peoples, and their institutions, the academia, the international communities, UN bodies, and all other respective bodies should work together. I think working together, we'll be able to bring changes in the life of the life and culture of the indigenous peoples. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mothurada, and thanks everyone, guest speakers, participants, and who are watching this event from Facebook Live. Thanks, speakers, for your available intervention, suggestion, comments. So we are documenting it, and after that, we will submit this summary of the discussion and also recommendation to EMRIP, Permanent Forum, and also UNESCO. I think that will be played a great role to work to protect, promote, and revitalize the indigenous people's language in Bangladesh. So I think the objective of this event is not only to draw attention to indigenous language, but also to work to make longevity, or sustainability of our language. Otherwise, end of the day, we will see that the decade period will be finished, but we could not see any remarkable achievement to revitalize indigenous language. So that's why this kind of lobby, advocacy, and campaigns are very important at the national level, local level, and also international level. So I think this was a great discussion with the participation of you. So I thank all, and now we can conclude the program here. Thank you very much.